Welcome to the Ministry of Gaming's Wednesday briefing. My name's Runz, and I'll be giving you your update for today. Coming up in today's show, Guild Wars 2 The Secret of the Southsun is released. There's a tongue twister for you. And NCSoft reports that microtransaction sales for Guild Wars 2 have been consistent and strong. Take-Two release their fourth quarter financials. Harebrained Scheme announces that Matrix gameplay will be included in Shadowrun Returns. And finally, the developers for the Game of Thrones mod for Crusader Kings 2 has revealed that a massive update is currently under development. Guild Wars 2's latest update was released yesterday. Entitled The Secret of the Southsun, the patch sees you returning to Southsun Cove. You may well be familiar with that from the Flame and Frost update. The latest update brings with it a new storyline involving a number of mysterious animal attacks, set against the background of increasing tension between the Consortium guards and the refugees from the Flame and Frost update. Other content includes the addition of traps for World v World PvP and a delightful crab tossing game. The update follows NCSoft's first quarter earnings call, which revealed that Guild Wars 2 microtransactions have been consistent and strong, even after sales of a box copy of the game began to flag. This bodes well for the future of Guild Wars 2, as although those box copy sales of the game have begun to taper off, it means that microtransactions will continue to happily support the game and future development. This is emphasised by NCSoft revealing that they are in fact preparing for a new expansion for Guild Wars 2, as well as continuing their living world concept. Currently, no further details about the planned expansion have been revealed. Full patch notes for the latest Guild Wars 2 update is available on the Guild Wars 2 website, and the report on the planned expansion from the first quarter earnings call is available on polygon.com. Take-Two Games have revealed a strong fourth financial quarter with a net profit of $21.2 million. It would appear that Bioshock Infinite was the main reason for the strong financial quarter, with first month sales, which Take-Two say vastly outstripped demand for any previous Bioshock game. Take-Two also revealed what they called solid demand for the Bioshock Infinite Season Pass. This is despite the fact that none of the planned 3 DLCs have as yet been released, or in fact revealed as yet. However, it wasn't all rosy for Take-Two Games, as despite the strong fourth financial quarter, they did have an overall financial year loss, to the tune of $29.5 million. Now, although that's not any reason to start popping champagne bottles just yet, it is a vast improvement from the $108.8 million loss that Take-Two reported this time last year. To be honest, games publishers have had a fairly rough year so far. We've seen EA Games undertake a corporate restructuring plan this year, as well as their CEO stepping down, and Square Enix recently reported a significant loss, which they blamed on sales in Europe and North America. I believe that was to the tune of somewhere around $60 million. On top of that, we've had several development studios shut down following the end of the 2013 financial year. And to an extent, you're left asking yourself who really is to blame for all this. Is interest in computer games waning? Is the market actually decreasing, as some commentators say? Or is it the fault of the game publishers and developers themselves? Certainly in the case of Square Enix, it could strongly be argued that they vastly overestimated the number of units they would sell of some of their games released this year. The one that really springs to mind is Tomb Raider, which was released in a period of very stiff competition from a lot of other games. Bioshock Infinite really being the main one that stands out there. And also the fact that you had Far Cry 3 released not all that long ago, and that was a massive game and pretty much held people's attention for the idea of a island adventure shooter. And let's face it, despite a lot of the money ploughed into development for Tomb Raider and significant graphics upgrades, a storyline redevelopment which all takes money and funding, fundamentally the gameplay mechanics weren't all that fantastic, ultimately. And a lot of complaints that the enemy character types that you came up against were bland and often repetitive. So, is it the fault of the games companies really overestimating what they're selling and not getting back to basics of good game mechanics? Or is, as some blame, the market for games actually shrinking? I'm actually on the side that, well, it's probably the fault of the developers, but that's just my personal view. I think a lot of the success of smaller games, particularly on platforms like Steam, and the very high number of Steam users that continue to buy games, not just for new releases, but also older games that they just haven't got around to playing yet, shows that there's a strong demand for games. They just want things that have solid game mechanics. It doesn't need to cost $100 million to make it a good game. It just needs to have a solid premise, solid game mechanics, and I think a lot of game developers seem to have forgotten that. 1 year after its initial release, the developers of the Game of Thrones mod for Crusader Kings 2 has announced that they're planning a massive update which will include the continent of Essos. Each of the 3 cities and the Slaver Bay realms will be included, and they will be using the Republic DLC mechanics, although this does mean that you will need to purchase the Republic DLC for Crusader Kings 2 in order to play these factions. A release date has not yet been announced, and it does look like they're going to be releasing the additions to the mod in stages. It is, after all, effectively doubling the landmass available in the mod. I'm actually a very big fan of the Game of Thrones. I'm sure most of you are, and this mod is absolutely fantastic. If you enjoyed Crusader Kings, if you enjoy the political and intrigue aspect of a Game of Thrones, then you really do owe it to yourself to check out this mod. And I will put a link to the developers blog and the download link in the description below. And finally, some older news, but news that I feel really deserves to be promoted because it hasn't had as much exposure as it really does deserve. Harebrained Schemes have announced that Matrix environment will be included in Shadowrun Returns. In a development blog post by Mitch Gittelman, it was revealed that Deca gameplay had gone through several revisions so far, but the development team felt that none of them really captured the essence of what they wanted to do. It had initially been decided that the complete Matrix experience would be just unfeasible to include, particularly within the tight time frame that Harebrained Schemes had to release Shadowrun Returns. It is in fact due out this June and is already available for pre-order on Steam. However, after several revisions, the developers really did note that none of their interpretations of this slimmed down version of the Matrix really met expectations, and in a move that I wholeheartedly support, they felt that they would be letting down gamers by not including some form of more complete Matrix experience. The Matrix really is an integral part of the Shadowrun world, and it would have felt somewhat flat not to really include it. Mitch finally concluded his blog post by stating that the only real way to do the Matrix justice was to include it how it had initially been intended, despite this tight deadline that they had to produce and obviously the financial constraints. Now, Mitch was very clear to state that it wouldn't be a entire Matrix experience, as in you couldn't jack in anywhere and explore the vast depth of the Matrix. That would just be unrealistic and unfeasible to do within the Shadowrun Returns project. However, there would be several points within the game where your Deca would be required to log in and use programs, face off against Black ICs, and use AI programs, much in the same way as in the real life part of the game. players would be coming up against physical security and security guards. Mitch concluded that the building blocks for creating your own Matrix environment within the Shadowrun mission editor would be included, so there is scope for player-generated content which will really exploit the capability of this new Matrix environment that Harebrained Schemes are including in the game. As I mentioned before, I am extremely excited for Shadowrun Returns release. It's out in June, it's available for pre-order on Steam. I believe it's currently 10% off on a pre-order. It looks like it's going to be a fantastic game, and it's somewhat reminiscent of the old isometric view of games like Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. Obviously with just a lot more modern trickery, post-processing effects, all that sort of thing, particle effects, etc, and it looks fantastic, not just in a graphical sense and the special effects, but also the gameplay mechanics look well thought out. This is a game created by the people who created the original Shadowrun pen and paper version in digital format, and I don't think it's going to disappoint fans of either the RPG genre or fans of the Shadowrun universe, so look forward to future gameplay videos of that on this channel. Well, that just about wraps up the Wednesday briefing. I've been Runz. Thank you very much for joining me. If you have any comments, either positive or negative, please do leave them below. Leave me a thumbs up or subscribe if that's your thing. Thank you very much for joining me at the Ministry of Gaming.